You are finally awake.
The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. What is there to say about this game that hasn't been said already? A masterclass in world design and ambiance, Breath of the Wild is nothing less than an absolute masterpiece in game design. In 20 years, this game will be considered in the same way that Ocarina of Time is today. It's one of the best games ever made. Of course, there are some problems with it, which I'll get into. Nothing's ever perfect, but to me, the flaws that I find in this game are microscopic in comparison to the feeling that I got exploring Hyrule the first time. The feeling of freedom that I was given, when compared to practically every other AAA game on the market at the time, was like having 1,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. I spent my life in shackles with waypoints, dotted lines, and constant handholding, but Breath of the Wild set me free. If you can't tell, I love this game. If you've played it, you probably love it too. Everybody loves this game. If you don't have a Switch or a Wii U, the console is honestly worth it for this game alone. I don't want to spend too long talking about how good the game is because you can find that out for yourself. I recommend the review by King K. He goes into some really solid detail and his videos are in general just pretty spectacular in quality. But instead, what I want to do for this video is look to the future. So, at E3 2019, Nintendo closed their direct with a brief trailer announcing that the sequel to Breath of the Wild is being developed. This obviously made people lose their minds, including me. I lost my mind. I don't know where it is. Where did it go? Now, it's likely we won't see anything about this game until next year, with a release date of probably holiday 2021, maybe 2020 if we're super lucky, but that's a long time, and I am very impatient. I'm a stupid little baby who wants his video games now, and I don't want to wait, so I'm gonna pretend. So here's my pitch for what I want to see in the sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Alright, so first let's talk about the gameplay. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I'm not a game designer by any definition of the word. However, I like to think I've picked up on, the ideas of good design over the years, and hopefully you can agree with me on some of these ideas. Some of them may be too expensive or too much, but whatever, it's a YouTube video, relax. Also, it's Zelda, they can afford it. If you follow Nintendo game design, you've probably noticed a bit of a pattern in a lot of their games. Most of them involve a gimmick of some sort, something to differentiate it from the previous entries in the series, except for the new Super Mario games. I don't know what the fuck Nintendo's doing with that. But in general, each additional game in a franchise will have a hook that makes it different. For Mario Odyssey, it was the use of Cappy. For Twilight Princess, you can turn from Good Boy Link into Good Boy Link. For Breath of the Wild, it was the world and the freedom to explore it. I think for this next game, there needs to be a similar enough hook. Breath of the Wild was about exploring this unknown world by yourself. A somber, lonely experience of riding on horseback or walking through fields on your own. But not this game. This game needs to be about companionship. When the trailer dropped, everybody went crazy about the announcement, about Ganondorf, but I think there's something that not enough people are talking about, and that's Princess Zelda herself. Not just her adorable new haircut, which I love, she looks amazing, you go girl, but the fact that she's there with Link. It was hinted at in the true ending for Breath of the Wild, and I think confirmed in this announcement trailer. Link is no longer alone in his adventures. He has Zelda alongside him. A lot of people want Zelda to be playable, and me too. I would love that. That's one of my favorite parts about Cadence of Hyrule, which is a great game if you don't already know. However, I think Sakurai said it best when he said,
"In The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, Zelda is more into research than fighting."
A big portion of Zelda gameplay is combat, and this version of Zelda isn't as trained as Link is in that regard. So I think it would feel unearned and a little cheap to both characters to just have Zelda and Link be basically palette swaps of one another. They can be totally different characters like in something like Hyrule Warriors, but that I think might be a lot of development work for something that might not gel so well with the rest of the game. So I think we should save playable Zelda for another day, maybe the next game after this. And so instead, Princess Zelda should accompany you throughout Hyrule as a companion character. Now I know. I say companion in a Zelda game and you flip your shit. I too have been traumatized by Navi and Fi, but I think if Nintendo plays it right, Zelda could be a wonderful companion. Not only would it give us the opportunity to grow closer to her and the character over the course of the game, but she could also be really helpful in a gameplay sense. Think of like Ellie from The Last of Us or Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite. Maybe there's like a dedicated button for Zelda, where you talk to her and she makes a remark about the area you're in. Not a hint, but just some like extra information about the world would be really, really cool. And during a combat scenario, if you're locked onto an enemy and press that button, she can stun an enemy with her magic. Sort of like Atreus in God of War with his bow. She can stay out of the way of combat, and in stealth she can be invisible, so she's not a hindrance. It could also add some puzzle variety, since there could be some puzzles where she's required and then some puzzles where Link goes in about it alone. The next thing I want to see in this game is full voice acting. Now, I loved how voice acting was done in Breath of the Wild, with only cutscenes and certain characters being voice acted. And until recently, that would have been enough for me. But That was before Fire Emblem Three Houses came out, with full voice acting for every single line of dialogue in the entire game, and some good voice acting at that, with a good English dub. I'm of the belief that if Fire Emblem's able to do it, a game series which isn't very popular in the West apart from having the guys from Smash, then Zelda should be able to do it as well. The next gameplay topic I want to talk about has to do with the weapon durability. I actually kind of like the durability in the original game. I think that having this risk of your weapon breaking at any moment and being forced to switch styles on a dime made the combat a lot more engaging. However, I do believe that the weapons broke way too fast, especially early on. Like, holy shit, these swords feel like paper. I think a good compromise would be to have the ability, firstly, to check on your weapon durability in the menu. Maybe there's a meter, or it tells you the number of hits, or just anything to help you prepare to go into battle, because a lot of the times I would go into battle and I would think I had a ton of hits left on my sword, and then it would break in 2 hits, and then it was just pain. But I also think it'd be super helpful to have stations in towns or cities where you can repair your weapons, either with rupees or materials, or even like both, like the dye shop in Hitano Village, because nothing is worse than discovering a super cool sword that's one of a kind, only for it to break on the 5th hit when you try and use it. On that note, I think it'd be really cool to be able to upgrade your gear and have those upgrades be visible. We see a little bit of that in the trailer, since Link has some extra padding on the champion's tunic, so that makes me a little hopeful. It would also be nice to be able to upgrade your weapons and shields, not just armor. Maybe we can choose between durability and damage based on the materials we provide. Now, for the big topic, the overworld. The big question going around is, are we going to stay in the same Hyrule? Are we going to go to a new region like Termina from Majora's Mask? You know, it'd be a pretty bland sequel to have the same world design that we've already explored with only a few changes. But I'm not a fan of going to a new region, since I think there's a lot more to explore when it comes to Hyrule with the story. So here's what I propose. We stay in Hyrule, but it's not the Hyrule that we know from the first game. I'll get into a little bit more detail when we talk about the story, but we have a completely new Hyrule with new secrets and regions to discover. Next, I think that classic dungeons should make a return. I enjoyed the Divine Beasts, but I think the general consensus is that they are some of the weakest quote-unquote dungeons in the Zelda franchise, as they're constructed of mostly smaller puzzles that are more or less separate from one another without a sense of unity, if that makes sense. So I think the return of traditional dungeon design would be for the best. Or maybe more dungeons similar to Hyrule Castle from the first game, with a focus more so on enemies and secrets to discover instead of just puzzles. However, with that said, I do want to see the return of shrines. I loved the shrines in the first game. I think it was such a genius idea to basically make the entire world one big dungeon, with several mini dungeons littered around it in the form of shrines. I love the concept on paper, but I do think there can be some improvements. Firstly, the design of the shrines is all the same. Every single shrine, no matter where it is in the overworld, has the exact same visual design on the inside. I don't need everyone to be unique, but I think it'd be nice to have it correlate to the region of Hyrule that you found it in. So if it's in a snowy region, the shrine can be ice themed. If it's in the desert, it can be sand themed. If it's in Death Mountain, it can be fire themed, etc. I also think the shrines should be a little bit longer. King K says it really well in this video, but with how short the shrines are, there's often very little time to expand on the puzzle concepts in detail and challenge the player. I also think that the test of strength trials gotta go. Get those out of here. To go! It felt like all those shrines were done as just filler for when they couldn't think of a compelling puzzle shrine. There are 20 tests of strength trials, bring the total number of real shrines to 100. And that's not to mention the shrines that are entered from a shrine quest and don't actually feature anything inside. But I think those should stay, since you can argue that following the quest is a puzzle on its own, and I quite like those ones too. So my proposition is to instead have fewer shrines in general, maybe 70 or 80 total, but then have those shrines be longer to allow for more puzzle development with their ideas. To make up for the lack of tests of strength trials, because those were kind of cool at times, there should be more overworld bosses like the Molduga or the Hinox, where you're forced to fight them a little bit unprepared. I think it'd also be great to have more underground and underwater options with deep caverns and such to explore. There's so many bodies of water in Hyrule, but nothing below the surface, so proper swimming mechanics would be really great in making the world feel more alive and real. Maybe there's some underwater and underground towns too, with like Zora or Gorons that aren't part of the main civilization. Whew. That was a lot of gameplay to talk about, which I suppose makes sense because Breath of the Wild had a pretty minimal story, forcing the gameplay to become the primary focus. The majority of the story was told through the world, with so much hidden lore to be discovered and speculated about, in addition to finding the memories in order to unlock the true ending. I know there are a lot of people who didn't really like that decision, but I personally loved it, and I would love to see a similar philosophy for the sequel. And that's the thing, we keep calling it the sequel, or the next Zelda game, or Breath of the Wild 2, but we've never really come up with a name, right? It's obviously not going to be called Breath of the Wild 2, as funny as that would be. We know that this game's going to be dark in tone, not only from the trailer that we got, but also with several interviews saying that this game will be even darker than Majora's Mask. That sets me up for a lot of excitement, since the darker Zelda games are some of my favorite. So here's my proposed title: The Legend of Zelda: Curse of the Wild. The game starts in Hyrule Castle, Free from the control of Calamity Ganon, the castle is able to return to its normal functions in serving Hyrule. Link and Zelda walk side by side through the halls of the castle, and we learn that it's been a few years since the events of the first game and the steps that they have taken to rebuild. Because the royal guards were all but wiped out, there are Goron, Zora, and Gerudo working alongside the Hylians so they can rebuild. There's been some mysterious activity happening deep within Hyrule Castle, and Zelda and Link are tasked to investigate. They travel through the caverns below the castle, discovering ancient ruins from an old civilization, depicting an ancient Gerudo warrior. Malice spreads from somewhere further below, and we get the scene from the trailer. Zelda and Link discover a mummified corpse, held down by a mysterious green power that has taken the form of a hand. Zelda steps forward to investigate, and the corpse of Ganondorf turns his head and his eyes begin to glow red. The floor collapses below Zelda and she falls into the darkness below. Link reaches out to save her, but the green power lunges at him and attacks his hand, making him drop the Master Sword and fall into the abyss with her. There's a flash of green energy, and Link awakens on the ground in another cave. Zelda is missing, and so is the Master Sword. But there's something strange about his hand. It now pulses with the same mysterious green energy, granting him new powers just like the Sheikah Slate did. Link ventures through the cave until he finds Zelda, and that's our tutorial for the new mechanics. They escape the cavern and step out into Hyrule, but something's changed. Mountains and roads and structures are completely different. This isn't the Hyrule that we know. Link and Zelda have been sent back 10,000 years in time to the time of legend.
Now you say they go to the past. How about we call it back to the past? No. A back to the future.
Now I know what you're gonna say, we've had time travel. A lot. It feels like we've had it done a million times at this point. And more often than not, it messes with the timeline and makes more branching, which we don't need more of. It's complicated enough as it is. However, the time travel in this game is more of a story point than a game mechanic. We're not going back and forth or anything. It's just a way to introduce a new Hyrule and explore the history that was implied from the first game. In addition, this is a closed loop. There are no alternate timelines because this is the only timeline. The hero of the wild has become the hero of legend that was foretold in the first game. So the main goal of this game is to make it back to the present day and defeat Ganondorf, all the while battling a younger version of him as he grows more powerful. Similar to the first game, I would like the story to remain mostly simple and focus more on the world and the lore of Hyrule. However, there are some points that I would like to see. Firstly, it's pretty well regarded in the Zelda theorist community that the blue energy from the Sheikah technology is connected to the Triforce of Wisdom, as well as that Ganon's malice is connected to the Triforce of Power. So I propose that the mysterious green energy is a form of the Triforce of Courage. This would fit within the legendary dragons of the Triforce of Farosh, Nehru, and Dinral, but more importantly, the color green can be the symbol of the hero, leading to us receiving a version of the green tunic. Secondly, I would like to see the memories make a return. I really liked how the story of Breath of the Wild was a reward for exploring the world, and it let us explore Zelda's character much more. However, instead of Zelda's character, I'd love to see it explore Ganondorf. His rise to power, his childhood, and how he as a person copes with being the living embodiment of evil and darkness in parallel to Link being the living embodiment of good and light. My favorite version of Ganondorf is the one from Wind Waker, so it would be interesting to take a page from that kind of story where he's more relatable and you can sympathize with him. I'd also like to explore a lot of the mysteries from Breath of the Wild, specifically the Zonai tribe. For those who don't know, the Zonai were a race of people from the Faerun region who worship the dragon Farosh and presumably have connections to the hero of legend. It would be really interesting to explore their culture and have their magic be the catalyst for all the dungeons and shrines in the game, similar to how the Sheikah were for the first game. I'd also really like to see how the 8 heroines play into everything involving Ganondorf and the Gerudo. And more importantly, I want to fight the Leviathans. They can be dungeon boss fights or they can be secret bosses, I just want to fight them. These massive creatures of legend which inexplicably died would be such an incredible battle that would be reminiscent of some of the best boss fights in the series. Maybe one of them you accidentally blow a giant hole in the side of the Hebrew Peak. That would be pretty sweet, I'd really like that. I would also really like to explore the Master Sword. Obviously, you'd have to go and quest for it and find it again. There is this whole idea that in Breath of the Wild, the Master Sword was not as powerful as it should be. And there's evidence for that with regards to how it's beat up when you first find it and how it doesn't actually defeat Ganon, but instead Zelda's magic does. So it'd be really cool to maybe take a page from Link to the Past and you go to specific dungeons in any order you would want, obviously, and you go and you power up the Master Sword. Maybe that can be the main plot of the game. Alright, now on to the ending. So Link and Zelda defeat Calamity Ganon in the past, because that would be a boss fight. We got that from the legends. And he transforms back into Ganondorf for another phase. Once defeating him in this form, Link stands over him with his sword to his throat, ready to kill him. But Zelda stops. She realizes that they can't kill Ganondorf, because for 10,000 years there had been no sign of the calamity or any other evil from Demise's curse. Killing Ganondorf now would result in his reincarnation in a future where Link and Zelda are unable to be there to stop him. So instead, Ganondorf needs to be trapped while still being kept alive, specifically in the same means that the Sheikah monks were mummified in. Zelda and Link's path home is closing soon, and they don't have much time, but someone needs to stay behind to hold Ganondorf down. Link decides he needs to be the one to do it. Zelda tries to fight him on it, saying that they can figure something out, but Link looks at her, and we hear him speak. "Princess, go." shocked. Zelda agrees, takes the Master Sword, and manages to escape. Link then looks to Ganon. The green energy surges through his hand and begins to cover his entire body. Ganondorf laughs as Link's body begins to fade away, leaving only the spirit of the hero to protect the realm of Hyrule from evil. Zelda arrives back in the present and is forced to face the resurrected Ganondorf alone, and we get another phase of the boss fight where we play as Zelda using her magic in the Bow of Light. But it's not enough. Zelda gets knocked to the ground, and Ganondorf stands over her, spear to her throat. That's when we see a speck of green energy float past Ganondorf. It starts small, but it builds and builds until it's a steady stream of pure light originating from the Master Sword. It forms itself into a being, and Link stands behind Ganondorf full power, ready to defeat him. In the final phase of this boss fight is Spirit Link versus Zombie Ganondorf. After the defeat of Ganon, Link's spirit fades away, finally at rest and able to be passed on to the next generation. Zelda returns the Master Sword to its rightful place for when the next hero needs it, and she builds a statue of the hero to stand in front of Hyrule Castle as a tribute to Link, the hero of Hyrule. His courage need not be remembered, for it will never be forgotten. None of that shit's actually gonna happen in the real game, but I couldn't wait any longer and I felt like getting my excitement out there for everybody. I know this feels like some kind of shitty fanfiction, and nothing I could ever come up with could compare to what they'll actually do in the next game, but I like to think that I use the evidence from the previous game in a way that makes it seem more like a theory video injected with some of my own ideas. A lot of inspiration came from tons of Zelda theory videos like the ones from Zeltic, Nintendo Black Crisis, and Commonwealth Realm. I've left links to their channels in the description, so be sure to check out their stuff. This Prewrite series is really fun, so I'm definitely going to keep doing it. I want to stick to games for now, since if I pre-write a movie, it could end up ruining the end product of the story because of my expectations and stuff. So let me know in the comments down below what you think I should pre-write next. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me out. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. If you want to support me even further, I've updated my Patreon with new tiers and benefits like early videos, scripts, special Discord server, and more. So head on over, check that out. This has been TroyboyA17 with Fanboy Prewrites, and I'll see you around.